Hello, hi everyone. In today's session, I'm going to give presentation on agile methodology and the importance of agile, when we should go for agile, and in real time in industry, how agile is adopted for software development. So basically, in this session, I'll try to give as much as a practical experience. It will be more like a comparison on how we do rather than explaining the theoretical objective of agile methodology. So before I start a few PPT, I'd like to give some agile concept. So there are many concept in the agile, but mainly when we go for methodology, right? So it is always depend on how and what type of product that you are going to deliver, and there are many things involved in it. It is not just you choose HL or you choose waterfall or you choose v model. So there are a lot of things that are involved before we go for or choose a methodology, right? So each company will have their own style of delivering the things, right? Suppose some XYZ company is following some agile methodology, it is not necessary that some other company also should adopt a similar kind of methodology and deliver the project. It's not necessary. So basically it depends on the organization, the maturity, and the product that they are developing or delivering, or they offering the service, right? So when it comes to software methodology, right, so we have seen a waterfall, v model, spiral, iterative, and now the trendy one is agile, right? So the purpose of SDLC remains same. Still the concept of SDLC remains same, that is requirement analysis, design, testing, implementation, right? So that remains same, but how we deliver, that is the point, right? So basically all methodology will have the advantages, disadvantages, and it works for them, it doesn't work for others. So it's a combination of all. So we should wisely think why we need this methodology, whether I'm okay to adopt V, water, spiral, or etcher. So that is something that we have to think. Now let's start. What is the difference that we have in waterfall and agile methodology? So I have a few lists here. So let's go through one by one and discuss parallelly. So agile model offers us that pros it's incremental and iterative approach design, right? Whereas a waterfall model is a sequentially in the sense, first we have to gather the requirement, then come up with the higher level design, then derive the lower level design from the higher level design, then develop, then you start test, then you deliver, right? But here it's a iterative, like it goes parallel in the sense you have something in place. So development team and testing team start focusing on that, they start working together, they don't wait for someone to complete their job. It goes parallel here, right? So that's the one thing that we could see. So and the second the point here is like the requirement, right? So it can be broken into any piece of stories. So for waterfall model, right, so the requirement will be given. So you are not in the position to decide which one you should take, start developing it, what is the priority, what is that stakeholder is looking for, uh, what is their priority to have this, right? So that kind of discussion will not take place. They get the requirement, complete requirement, but they have to work without knowing the priority, without knowing the importance of the stakeholders needs and all that. In waterfall model they have to start it, but here in the case of agile model, you as a product owner can decide, hey, I want these pieces should go first, I want these items should be implemented first than this. So they have the clear visibility, so they can choose which and all stories should be there first, then the non-importance one can be taken later. So the product owner involvement at the story level till it goes at end level, and the product owner can decide what is the importance of the stories, and how when product owner needs it. So they have the call, they can decide it in the agile model. And here what I said, that's the same thing, like here the customer can have the visibility, early visibility. So they can decide on the changes of the project. Suppose they want to give they want to change their requirement, right? So suppose they want to have something, but later they decided that with the competitor level in the market that they have something else better than what they are going to have, right? So there is a chance for the customer, they can think, change the requirement. But whereas in waterfall model, right? So that kind of changes you can't do until you get the product, until you start using it and comparing that with the market and with your competitor. So then later you realize that, hey, okay, my competitor has something like this, I want same to compete with the competitors, right? So then that comes as a change request, then again your effort goes in the waterfall model. So but whereas in agile you can keep visiting your product, and you can involve your users, customers in the early phase of the development, so that they can think, change the requirement as and when they want, when they need, when they have to compete with others, they can change the requirement at any point of their uh, visibility, right? So then agile model is considered unstructured compared to waterfall model. Absolutely, because here we don't go like requirements should be there freezed, you should have something architectural envisioning before you start some development. Nothing is required here, right? So you got something as a story, you start developing it. So there is no structured based work here, and there is no planning oriented, like I give first this, then you start from there, and nothing is there, right? It goes parallel, it comes the work will be divided to each teams, they comes together, they start working in it. But whereas the waterfall model, it's a planned one. They decide the requirements, they freeze the requirement. Once requirements is freezed, then they start thinking about the higher level design, then they develop the lower level design, then they start developing it, then testing team will be involved to test the product. Then after all is okay, then only they give the product to the stakeholders, right? So it's a planned activities, who should do what by when. But whereas in agile model there is no such planning, it's all team will be involved simultaneously, they all work together and they develop the software. Okay, then when it comes to a project sizing, right? So agile will be best fit for small projects, because here you don't have to you know estimate for the projects. You don't have to plan for the project, you have something as a stories, right? So you start developing it quickly, and customer will have the early visibility, and he says if everything is okay, then he says, yeah, I'm fine with the product. But whereas Whereas in waterfall model, irrespective of project size, whether it's big, small, or whatever it is, you go get the requirement, from there the work starts. But here most of the time you skip the work. You start developing it and delivering it as soon as possible, right? It's a very quick process. And when it comes to error, right, defects, right, or any deviation, right, it's very easy to fix in the middle of the project, because you're still enhancing the product by adding the stories, by removing the stories, by changing some stories, right? So there are chances that you get some defects, but do not worry, it can be fixed in the next sprint or ongoing sprint, or wherever you can accommodate work, it can be done. But in the waterfall model, such defects or such deviation or such requirements error, of course we do static review, peer review, requirements review and all that, but there are chances that if requirements are not captured clearly, right, so there are chances that it can be logged as a requirement error, it can be logged as a design error, it can be logged as functional error, right? So whatever the error you log, you are not in the position to fix it in the middle of the project. You have to wait for the complete cycle of the development, then go for a fixing, right? That is the disadvantage, because you already knew that something is not correct, but you're not in the position to fix the defects, right? So something like that, it is very difficult, right? So that's the one thing. And also the activities of the agile will not be more than 2 weeks or 4 weeks. So you get the product completed within that time frame, right? But whereas in waterfall model, it's a phase-wise activities, like release 1, release 2, release 3. Release 1 will have some 3 to 4 months or 4 to 6 months time frame. So within that, you have to plan, you have to develop, you have to test, you have to deliver. But it's a long process. If customer is in hurry to get the product, so he has to wait for 6 months to get one product. But whereas in agile, the product can be swifted, project or product can be shipped within 2 weeks to 4 weeks time frame. The early visibility is there for the customer. So this is what common most common factors that will decide, that will give sense of which model is best for what reason, right? So let's move on. What is agile roles, how it works, and the process involved, all that. Now mainly when it comes to agile roles, right, so we mainly see a scrum master who takes the scrum meeting, and a product owner who decide the product stories, or decide or gives stories, right? And a team, right? So basically scrum master role, he will be acting like a coordinator between the various teams, in the sense, we have testing team, we have development team, we have service team, support team, we have so many teams, operational team and all that, right? So this basically, the scrum master will make sure that the plan or the sprint is going as per the plan. So basically what he does every day, he will have a 15 minutes to 30 minutes quick call with the team, by asking them what is planned for today, what is planned for tomorrow, and what he has done yesterday, and what is the impediments that he or she has, or anything blocker for him to not to take any stories, not to work on the product backlog items or sprint items. What is it, what he is doing, right? So he takes the updates from the team. He will decide if any blocker, showstopper kind of things. He will coordinate with the respective teams and make sure that the issues are resolved at the earliest time. And the whatever team has some problem, right, or related to the stories or whatever, or dependencies, impediments that they have, they are going to discuss, or they are going to raise it on the floor by saying, I am not able to continue on my piece of work because of I am having some dependency on others, so that will impact my days, my commitment, and this is impediment for me. So the kind of the talks which going on the scrum meetings, right, it's just not only what is doing for the day. No, it's also any impediments if the development team or testing team sees, right, so they have to raise it on the floor. The scrum master responsibility to coordinate with the respective team. Scrum Master, he doesn't own anything, but he will be a mediator or coordinator between the teams. He will make sure that the issues are getting resolved, and he will direct to the people that, hey, for this issue, go and talk to this person or send a mail, follow up with him, and all he does to make sure that the sprint activities goes smoothly. Then a product owner is someone who knows the product, who decides the stories, and who also does the acceptance testing after development is done, right? So product owner is one who knows complete picture of the product, and he knows the stories, he knows what we are developing actually. So he is the one who decides the stories on priority. He is the one who decides if stories is not important for the sprint, he can ask the uh, team to take it backlog, right? He has complete that kind of responsibility. So all this will be done in the sprint time, that is basically a 2 to 4 week sprint. So in that, these two are main people who are going to work on the product, right? So let's move on. What is the process involved here, right? So for any agile practice, uh, we we are going to come up with the sprint. Basically, as I said, it's going to be 2 weeks to 4 weeks, right? So when we are at the sprint planning phase, right, so product owner already given some stories that will be converted into backlog items. So that will be taken in the planning session. Okay, then when it actually comes to sprint, that is 2 to 4 weeks duration, so they are going to convert into sprint items, and the each stories after completion they are going to burn it, and they see what is done within the sprint, right? In the daily scrum meet, it's going to be 15 to 30 minutes based on the size of the team. They discuss about what I said in the previous slide. They discuss about their ongoing work and impediments, and there only, if anything, that they have to make a decision, they will do the decision in the scrum meet. And when it comes to sprint review meeting, right, so here the meeting will be like how many stories can be taken for the sprint, uh, and the availability of the resource, availability of the stories, and everything will be reviewed in the sprint meeting. And when it comes to last sprint retrospective meeting, right, so it will be discussed beginning of the sprint and beginning of the new sprint and end of the old sprint, right? So that day they will discuss how this sprint went, what is the good thing that you have seen, and what is the bad that happened, and what is the learning for us to avoid such bads and keep going good things. So all that they'll discuss, and they will make it out in that meeting, and they'll publish it on the forum. So this is generally we follow when it comes to agile practices. and process. So how agile works, right? So till now we have seen the role of scrum master, product owner, team, and what is scrum meeting, and how product owner is involved in the product backlog items, and what are the main terms that use in the agile, right? Sprint planning, sprint burn down charts, daily scrum meet, sprint review meeting, and retrospect. So actually how agile works, right? So the main team are like product owners, scrum master, team members, stakeholders, and users, right? So this is how it works. First, in the preparation, so they are going to groom the stories. First they will come up the stories which are going to be discussed in the sprint planning, right? So basically they take the stories from the product backlog item. They will decide, okay, I have 10 stories from the product backlog, I'm going to take 5 stories for this sprint. Let me discuss with the team and get the estimate from the team, and let's get the commit from the team that they are going to complete 5 stories in that sprint. Suppose I have 2 weeks sprint, right? So I have 5 stories taken from the backlog item. In the planning meeting, I'll put all 5 stories and I'll go through the each stories, and I'll explain what these stories and acceptance criteria for each stories to the team. Then from the development team and the testing team, they start looking at the stories and acceptance criteria. After that, they have to size the story. Here we follow hypnosis series, that is 1, 3, 5, 8, 11, and 13, 8 and 13, right? So basically the 13 minutes it's a 80 hours work, and 8 is means it's a 40 hours work, and 5 is means 20 hours work, and 3 means less than 10 hours work, right? So each story, for example, we have taken login functionality. Development team say it's a 3 point story, that means 10 hours work, and testing team says it's a 3 point story for them also. Then they freeze the story size saying 3, that means within 10 hours we can implement and test this story. Again, after login, so for example compose email, right? So the effort is more here, so development team says it's a 8 point story for me. Maybe testing team can go with the development by saying the 8 point, or if they see the validation scenarios or more, they have to test around the compose email, right? By adding bc, cc, to list, invalid email IDs, attachment, without attachment, maximum size, less size, all combination they have to test, right? They may not go and say it's a 8 point story. They may ask it's a 13 point story for me, because I have a lot of effort to do and test in this particular module. So then the scrum master will decide, and product owner will decide, okay, basically it's a product owner's call, will decide, okay, why you need 8, why you need 13. If both they can justify why it's 8 and 13, then it's a product owner call to decide what is the story size of that particular piece of story. So they may go with the development by saying, okay, you have to complete in 20 hours. Then testing team have to raise the concern that this many effort are there, I need 13 means 80 hours, right? So that discussion will happen, and finally they will come to one conclusion and they freeze the story. So all that will happen in the planning meeting. Once you got the estimation, you have to ask the team to commit the stories. For example, I have taken 5 stories, then I will ask each member of development team that whether we are able to complete the story or not in the sprint, or they have to move something to back to the sprint backlog item. If they say, okay, we can take all 5 stories, we have resource, then they commit 5 stories for that sprint and they will move on. So in daily cycle there will be a scrum meeting. They will update on the each stories from the development side and the testing side, and scrum master keep getting the updates from them, and the stories will be implemented. And finally when it comes to sprint review, right, so they will see how many stories has been completed for the sprint, and if all 5 stories are done, they'll groom again 5 stories, or they may take more than 5 stories also. If for example due to some reason 5 stories not able to complete, only 3 done, and two are still pending, right? So those stories will be carried forwarded to next sprint along with other product backlog item. In the retrospect meeting at the end of the sprint and the beginning of the new sprint, they'll decide about why two stories are not done, what went wrong, what are the impediments, what are the challenges they had during the sprint, the 2 weeks, resource crunch, unavailability of the environment, dependency on some other team due to which they are not able to complete the stories. All that they will discuss, and they will think about how to overcome of such incident, how to avoid such incident in the coming sprints, and all that they'll decide. They'll have plan and they'll go move on. So this is complete a cycle of 2 weeks that goes like this, and they will ship the stories to a product, and that product will be tested by product owner. And also there will be a demo at the end of the sprint to a stakeholders so that they can see what is developed. If they have some changes, if they want to do some changes or add something else on top of it, that will be taken in the stories and can be implemented. So this is how agile works, because since we are giving early visibility of the product to a stakeholders, they have a clear visibility on their product and they can think of what can be done, achieve better than this, or they can reduce, modify, add, whatever they can still do. And that will be taken again in the planning, sprint planning, again groom the story, size the story, start developing it again at the end of the sprint, give demo to the client, ask the commitment, ask the sign off from the stakeholders, and move on. Now, so this is how agile can quickly ship the product to a client. So basically we always work on the product which is necessary for the stakeholders, and stakeholders has the early visibility to see the product. And if the stakeholders need some modification, some changes, still they can go ahead and give it. So when it comes to within the sprint activity, right, so for example we have taken 5 stories. So testing team start developing the scenarios, start writing the test cases, send the test cases to a BA and the dev team, get it reviewed, internally reviewed, and put all your test cases ready. On the third day of the sprint, they expect a build should be given to them, and fourth day they'll start executing the user story number 1, right? And fifth day again the development team start developing the second story, and the testing team start testing the user story 1. And the eighth day they expect the user 2 story should be given to testing team. During 4 days again they start identifying the scenarios, start writing the test cases, send for review, get the approval, and start working on the user story 2 on the 8th day. So this goes like this. At the end of the 10th day they expect that the story should be freezed, and they have the buffer of 2 days to complete the story execution and 2 days for regression. At the 14th day of the sprint they will be in the position to see how many of the stories has been completed, in that what is the testing completeness, they see that, and remaining whatever the left stories will be moved to sprint backlog item. So within the sprint these activities are taken place. So this is how agile works in the industry, right? So let's move on and decide. Like as I said in the beginning, it is not necessary that I should go for agile if others are following. No, there are certain factors that involve to choose your methodology. Some of them I have given list here, so, and also given comparison, like what is good, excellent, poor, in which scenario it's good, excellent, poor, in which methodology and which model. So here are the list. We have waterfall model, V model, iterative, and agile, right? So wherever you see the requirements are not clear from the customer, it means customer doesn't know the requirement itself, customer doesn't know how product should look for him, customer doesn't know, or customer is new to the market, he wants something as a software, but he doesn't have any experience of software background. So his visibility is very less on the requirement side, right? Then waterfall model, V model, and at waterfall model and V model will not work, because waterfall model and V model will work only when your requirement is clear, crystal clear, and you know what you are developing exactly, and you know your customer will not change the requirement frequently. So iterative is still good because you have one cycle to complete the design phase, testing phase, and all that. Again, you go back to the customer, right? Still, if customer is not happy or okay, or he wants to add some changes, right? So still that adaptiveness of the changes are possible in the iterative, so it's a good. But agile is a best fit for the situation like unclear requirement, because still you can, you are in the driver's seat, like get the stories from the client, build it, demo it. If client is okay, move on. If client is not okay, ask him what else he needs, adopt it, develop it, give it demo, and move on. So all that flexibility you have in the agile. So second scenario, when the system is complex, right? Like lot of payment gateways are involved, there are a lot of multiple systems you have to call before you complete one complete flow, right? In that case, a waterfall model and v-shape are in a very good in driver seat, because the requirement in these complex systems are very much clear. They know where and all they have to interact, which and all systems they have to connect, and all that. But agile is a poor in this case, because the complex system you cannot work within the 2 weeks of time, or within the 4 weeks of time. It's required a lot of effort, a lot of dependencies, lot of infrastructure, lot of environments, lot of clarity on the requirement. So you cannot just start taking the items stories and start developing it and start giving demo. It doesn't work in that way. So complex systems, agile is not best fit, but other smarter methodology will be very good to to start with, right? Then if you don't know the technology, suppose some new technology you have adopted, and you are starting developing using the technology which is very unfamiliar, which is not familiar to all of them, all of your resource outside market and everywhere, right? In that case, waterfall model and v and also agile will not be fit, because here the challenges are like, first thing, that resource unavailability, resource unaware of the technology, and lot of learning is required, lot of understanding on the requirement and technology is required. So only iterative is good, because you keep upgrading the requirement technology in the iterative way. But agile you cannot start immediately, cannot complete within the 2 to 4 weeks. Waterfall model and v-shaped model, you cannot have the clear cut requirements. So but iterative, since you are going to start per cycle, right? So still iterative can give you the flexibility to adopt whenever the situation like unfamiliar technology are used in your software. And short time schedule, of course waterfall model will not work because it goes by sequential. Of course v shape will not work, it goes parallel, because um, um, if go you parallel and start taking the feedback from each time, when you incorporate all the changes, when you adopt the changes, when you have the flexibility to do the changes, right? So in the both case it will not work. Again, iterative will work because it goes per the cycle, and agile also will work for short time scheduled project, because you can adopt any changes at any point of time. The flexibility will be there in the iterative and in the agile. And stakeholders involvement, everywhere stakeholders will be there, even for any methodology model you use. So but in the agile, the stakeholder involvement is excellent, because they see the visibility in the early phase of the development only. So they know what exactly they are going to use as a software. Whereas in waterfall model, v-shape model, they get the product at the end of the project, completion of the project. But wherein agile, they start seeing the project at early stage of the development only. So this is the information, like when you should go and prefer the methodology which suits for you, right? So let's move on to the next slide. So almost covered in the previous slide, like how agile works, how sprint planning, review, grooming, estimation, developing, retrospect and all complete. Again, I'm trying to put same here, but in a very detailed way. Like as soon as we start the project, as soon as we kick off the project, right? So what we expect requirements should be converted into stories. For example, you are going to develop a product, you have complete stories, you have complete visibility on the product, but uh, having breaking them into the stories would help you to prioritize your stories and start adopting the stories at the sprint level and start giving it to the client. So it's a very important for us to break the requirements into piece of stories, right? Once stories are done, it will be groomed, it will be sized, it will be start taking in the sprint activity. When it's in the sprint, it will be shipped, right? That's the purpose. So decide the sprints here. So for example, I have a software to develop, but we should, it's a all rough estimate, here and there one or two sprints may vary. So the project manager will have a call with the stakeholders, manager, every product owner, everyone be involved. They decide how many sprints. For example, they say, hey, I want everything should be done in the 6 sprints. So basically 6 sprints means one sprint equals to 2 weeks. So 12 weeks time they give. 12 weeks means 3 months, right? Within 3 months they want the product. This is how rough estimate they'll give. Then as per this, they'll groom the stories and they get the story sign off and they start the sprint activities. So this is how initially the project will be started with the agile methodology, right? Then how it starts, right? So for example, we already decided it is a 6 sprint stories, right? So project it's already identified with 6 weeks, sorry, six um, sorry, what is that, 6 sprint, right? Means it's a 3 months activity, right? Each sprint will have 2 weeks time, right? So then we have total 30 stories are identified for the product, right? So all these 30 stories will be put under the product log items, and uh, and they start taking the stories at the sprint level from the backlog items, and they groom the 5 stories in the grooming meeting, and they plan these 5 stories in the sprint planning, wherein in the sprint planning they decide, they estimate the main activity will be taken in the sprint planning, or estimation and commitment of uh, each story from the defined testing, right? So then once estimation is done, they have to give the commit from, and they after the end of the sprint and before beginning the new sprint, they do the retrospect where they will see what are the challenges they went in the sprint, and they'll try to avoid in the upcoming sprint. So finally at the end of the sprint, that is sixth sprint, at the end of the sixth sprint, right, they will decide the product is good to go for production or not, or they have to do owning, or they have to do one more round of regression, or one more round of a business users test and all that. So basically the product will be shipped at the end of the sixth sprint, and stakeholders are in the position to see the complete product, and they can thereby they decide when they want to go for a live, and all that will happen. So this is all how the agile methodology works inside in an organization, and what are the differences that we have when it comes to other models, and what are the main roles inside the agile, how agile works, how the process involved in the agile works, and when we should go for agile, when we should not, what is the best and benefit we have when a situation like unclear requirement, complex system, unfamiliar technology, short-term schedule, and stakeholders involvement, what are the models which give the flexibility and all that, and how agile work starts when project is kicks off, and what are the stages that involved when they are developing the stories inside the sprint. I hope this will be very clear understanding session. um, if any questions, please feel free to drop me a message, and thanks for watching this. uh, Thank you.